Thank you ever so much for coming. I think this is the first one this year. Welcome to BCS London, and welcome to everyone behind the camera at the back there. We've got about 40 odds online now, and we've got probably another, well, same again, if not more, to join. So we get people joining for the first quarter of an hour or so. Thanks, Sam. So let me get things going. Oh, there it is. Look at that. So tonight's program, mastering cyber strategy. That sounds like a great thing to do. I've been working in cyber for a very long time, since long before it was called cyber, if I'm honest. And this is genuinely one of the hardest things to do, is to get sign off for the things that you know you want to do, know you should do. So tonight's talk should be really good, because it's all about winning board approval in 60 minutes. That sounds ambitious, you know, but I'm going to go with it. It'll be fine. So we're just 5 minutes late getting started. A quick presentation from me just to outline who we are, the BCS and the ISSG, and what we do, what we stand for. Then I'm going to hand over to these lovely folks from that security company. They're going to talk for something like an hour, give or take. And then we'll do a Q&A session. And then at the end of the Q&A session, those people who are lucky enough to be in the room here with us, we can go next door and have some sandwiches and things, and maybe even a glass of wine if you're lucky. Courtesy of these folks, by the way. So these folks have sponsored all of that. So thank you ever so much to them for that. And then I think we get kicked out of here somewhere around about 8-ish. But the fella at the back, Paul, is the head kicker outer. So keep an eye on him and you'll know when to leave. For those of you who don't know much about BCS, BCS is the Chartered Institute of IT. It's been chartered for 40 years now. I came to a celebration event with a massive cake and more wine, like you do next door, to celebrate our 40 years of being chartered. And being chartered means something. And I think it probably means something more today even than it did when we got our charter. The charter, by the way, is on the wall next door, so go and have a look at it. It's a very fine looking thing. But the BCS has around about 70,000 odd members, spread over 155 countries. The vast majority of them are here in the UK, of course. We've got branches up and down the country, so there's about 50 local branches. And there's about 50 specialist groups, of which ISSG, the Information Security Specialist Group, is one of them. Also 40 student chapters and 11 international sections. So lots and lots going on. If you're not a member of the BCS, you're very welcome to be here tonight and to come and join us. But we would love you to join the BCS itself, because power is numbers. And we are quite an influential body these days. We get involved in all sorts of government consultations on the direction of cyber in all sorts of areas of IT. I can't think how many consultations I've been involved with in the last 12 months with DSIT, the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. So BCS actually does have a voice, and we try and involve all of our members in those processes. So wherever we possibly can, we get you guys involved. It's worth pointing out that it's Chartered Week next month, 24th to the 28th. And we are running the first of what we hope will become an annual conference here at BCS London on the 25th of the month. So if you're interested in Convene, which will become an annual thing, and my guess is it will grow and grow and grow in significance and importance and all the rest of it, have a look at the website. If that's something that you think you'd be interested in, then do register for it. There are some costs involved in that one, whereas most of our ISSG events, thus far at least, have been free to members. But it's a little bit about professional registration and what it means. And that's one of the big pushes at BCS right now. Particularly, if we relate to some of the things that have gone on recently, like the Post Office Horizon scandal. Truth is, that wasn't an IT problem at all, was it? It was all about people and ethics. And that's what's brought us to where we are with Post Office and Horizon today. So we're trying to embed ethics into and professionalism into IT in the same way that you would for medical and so many other things. In fact, the CITP, the Chartered IT Professional Status, is one of, I think, 84 that are registered at the moment with the Privy Council. So it really does mean something. And if you want to be taken seriously in IT, at a senior level of IT, getting yourself CITP, getting yourself chartered really does mean something. So highly recommended. There's a bit there on what's in the Convene conference, if you're interested. Typical. Let's just do the old-fashioned way. So that was BCS. A little bit about ISSG. ISSG, we've been around since 1983. So we had our 40th birthday party with cake and wine and all the rest of it. There's a theme going on here, isn't there? Last year, and it was absolutely terrific. We took over this place for the entire day, and we had a great day. We are currently the largest specialist group in BCS, and we're very proud of that. And I think it reflects the fact that information and cyber security kind of crosses all boundaries within IT. It touches every single area. So we're really proud of that, but you know, that's less than 5% of the 70,000 members, and in my view it should be even higher. So if you think about the number of people in the UK who work in IT, 70,000 is a drop in the ocean. If you think of the number of people who work in information and cyber security and privacy and the areas that we cover, again, this is a drop in the ocean. So we would love to see more people joining us and doing the stuff that we do. So our remit is to deal with anything really to do with information and cyber security, cloud security, privacy, or anything, almost anything related to those topics. Our themes for the current year are cloud, they're quantum, particularly post-quantum cryptography, third-party management, third-party risk, AI, cyber risks around AI, both in terms of the implementation of AI, but also the use of AI to create cyber risk and to create attacks. So quite an interesting area, and lots of work around security standards. So I'm on the 27 standards committee for BSI on behalf of PCS. So we're quite closely involved in the development of all of that 27 series of standards as well. What else have we got in here? A little bit of housekeeping. So because it's Zoom, we can't do Chatham House rules. So there is no Chatham House rule today. We've got quite a number of people registered online and joining us as the evening goes on, I imagine. So we will have the chat open where I can answer questions as we go through, then I will. But we'll have a Q&A session with Eliza and the team right at the end. And that'll be open for anyone to ask anything. Final point there is the session is being recorded. Anything that's green in the ceiling is a microphone. So we're recording all of the activities in the room tonight, everything that gets said and done. As I say, there's a big camera on the wall up there. So we will publish that at the end. Very briefly, a little bit about me. I've been in the game for quite a long time. I sort of had two careers. Over here is where I started with telephony, back with post office telephones and BT, and then moved into some security stuff. So that's a firewall rule base. Got into digital certificates, PKI, Alice and Bob stuff. And then the other half of my career really has been putting some of that in practice and working for a living, really. So I became CISO at a little company called Synopsis Solutions that almost nobody's heard of. But we've probably got one of the largest databases in the country of people, and we use that data to prevent and detect fraud, mainly in the financial services sector, but also for government as well. So we store and process quite a chunk of data, and people get all nervous about that, you know, if you've got lots of personal information. So this was a busy job. I stepped down from it just a couple of years ago and handed over to one of my colleagues who was desperately pleased to take it on. And I was desperately pleased that he took it on. So I'm now down to 3 days, but my 2 days off seem to just get busier and busier. So I'm not sure that I've necessarily come up with the best deal, but yeah, that's kind of what we do. I've been chair of ISSG for a few years now, and again, just to focus in on what BCS is good at. BCS is good at introducing you to all sorts of things that are going on in the world of IT, and putting you in touch with lots of people who work in IT. So if networking is your thing and you want to know about what's going on in IT, BCS is just a brilliant place to do that. So finally, future events. The next event that we've got scheduled is on the 18th of February. That's hacking planes, trains, automobiles, and ships, apparently. I was talking to Ken yesterday, I think it was, just having a quick catch up with him about that. And he does some really cool stuff. It's going to be a great fun presentation. I know he's going to bring some boxes of tricks with him to do some sort of demos. If any of you have ever seen him either at InfoSec or any of the other places that he presents, he is really, really entertaining and engaging. So he will come and talk about all of that. Kent Branch are doing a careers in cybersecurity event on the 20th of Feb. We've got the Convene conference that I mentioned on the 25th of Feb, that's here. And then very early April, possibly the 1st, maybe the 8th, we haven't finalized it yet. We've got Neil Firminger from ISSG coming in to talk about the latest version of Cyber Essentials, which is going to be called Willow. So that takes over from what some of you might already know and love, which is Montpellier. I don't know where they get those names from. It's weird, isn't it?
Why do these companies love a name change?
I don't know. So there we go. Enough from me. I'm going to hand over to these lovely people, and I'll sit at the back and take a few notes, answer any questions from the good folks online, and hopefully we'll all get together for a chat and a drink at the end.
Okay. So we're talking about cybersecurity strategy quite holistically. So everything from what is a strategy, and there's some of you in the room that are quite senior, and then there's some of you in the room that are quite junior. So we're just going to start off there, and we're not going to touch on that for much longer. And we're going to talk about strategy in a non-technical sense, what it means, what it looks like, and then we're going to move into cybersecurity strategy. Yeah, some interesting things, and we don't just want you to just ask questions at the end. If you have anything to add and you've got any experience with strategy or implementing strategy, tracking it, making sure it's successful, those things, we would like you to talk about that at the end. We welcome that. Okay, so I'm Eliza May Austin. I'm the CEO of that security company. It's the most ridiculous business decision I ever made, because I have to really think about it before I even type it into Google myself. So if you want to hear more about us, just come and talk to one of us at the end. And yeah, we also own the domain That Security Company as well, so it's not that hard. So Rich?
It is that hard. It's taken me 2 years to learn how to type it.
SEO hates us.
Oh, yeah.
The algorithm hates us.
Absolutely. So hi, I'm Rich Benfield, Director of Technology. I've sat where you sat for 25 years. And I made the switch over to cybersecurity in the last few years. So hopefully what you're going to see from us today reflects stuff that affects you and things that you really need.
I'm Rosie Anderson. I'm Head of Strategic Solutions, which means my role is to help unpick a customer's challenges and help them solve problems. So I'm a problem solver within the business. Okay, so what is a strategy?
So a strategy is like a roadmap. And
It could be a dance on there.
Look, regardless of the complexity of your journey, it will get you to your destination. When you say it quickly, it doesn't sound that challenging, does it? So you'd be amazed, though, at the quantity and the quality of people that struggle with this concept. Everyone assumes that they know what strategy is, but actually, most people find themselves getting bogged down with things that are not actually strategy, things like tooling, so on and so forth. So we'll cover that off later in the talk. Incidentally, top tip for success with building a strategy is to stay laser focused on the concept of a strategy being the roadmap. It's not the car, it's not the destination.
Okay, so the way I like to think of it, it's just a really sort of rough way of talking about it, is if I was to say to everyone in this room, I want everyone to get to Paris by tomorrow. So you need to be in Paris by tomorrow. That would be a vision, right? The vision is everyone in this room gets to Paris and we all meet up. So we know where our starting point is and we know where we need to be, but the strategy is all the steps in between. So if you were to go and work out the way that you were going to go there, so some of you might fly, some of you might walk, some of you might swim, some of you might get on the train. What's it called? It's not the underground, is it? Eurostar. So there's all these different methods of strategy, but then rather than just going ahead and doing that, you might have to put things in place like a gap analysis and try and work out which is the best strategy. But just for the most basic of sense, the strategy is all the bits in between of where you are now to where you need to be. Okay. Oh, it's me again. Okay, so something I think is really important to touch on is in a business sense. So when you are employed in any company, regardless of what type of company it is, whether they've got loads of money or they're a startup and they don't have a great deal of money, you really need to be thinking of interdepartmental budgets. Sounds really boring, but it's not. So you might have the best strategy. So if we go back to my travel analogy, you might say, okay, the quickest way to get there is we go on a private yacht, right? And we go on like a speedboat private yacht, and then we get there, and then we'll get an Uber and it will take us there. Okay, so that might be interesting, right? But there might be other people that have got better knowledge of another way of doing it. And I suppose a really good example for a actual business sense is, say, Rich, who's our director of technology, decides, I don't like the sales tool that we're using. So I don't like the tool that we're tracking all of our customers with and our would-be customers. I think it's crap. I don't want to have to secure it. I want rid of it. So as the director of technologies, we need the right to make that decision. But Rosie is head of strategic solutions and manages the customer onboarding. Would look at it and go, well, actually, that's going to knock me out of my day-to-day work for quite a long time. I'm going to have to learn a new tool. I'm going to have to train people on a new tool. I might lose data. I'm midway through projects. And he might say, yes, but we're saving the business money because this other tool is already cheaper. It's really easy to use. It comes with free training. But she might look at that and go, actually, there's all of this spend you're not thinking about, right? And if I just miss one of those potential customer journeys in that, there's more money there that we can't even quantify. So a strategy and developing a good strategy is also getting a difference of opinions as well, and working with different departments and understanding that although you might be doing something to meet the vision being we don't want this tool, or the vision being I want everyone in Paris tomorrow, in order to get there, you do actually need different opinions and understand where the money comes from to implement that. And although you might have the right to do it, the actual money may be untangible and be coming from different areas within the business. Yeah, oh, sorry. So my face was originally next to this. So I think there's a mistake there. So I'll just talk a little bit more, even though everyone wants me to shut up and I can sense it. I'm sorry. So you do need a framework in order to develop a strategy. And I'm not talking about a rigid framework where you go and learn about it on a course. I'm talking about a spreadsheet. I'm talking about a way of working. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be tidy. It doesn't have to look great, but it does have to exist in order for you to get a project off the ground and in front of someone, to get it funded and to get it implemented. So yeah, Rich.
So yeah, your strategy, it will vary on a case-by-case basis as you consider the needs of each department in your organisation. After all, cybersecurity done right is not a one-size-fits-all solution or scenario. Yeah, you'll have the broad strokes that apply across the whole organisation, but the devil is in the detail. And this is where you need to justify your cross-departmental spending. After all, your strategy will likely impact on the people, the processes, and the technology right the way across the business. So on that final point about how do you know you're on track to deliver, your strategy is something that you as a senior leader may well be measured against. If you don't have a strategy mapped out and agreed, how will you measure the success of your program of works? Or put it another way, your strategy should result in fewer items on your company's risk register. And without a strategy, you have nothing to map against that register.
That's me again, sorry.
So.
Okay, so if we go back to a travel analogy, right, and I was to say, so I'm better off if I don't read the slides, just because I get distracted by making sure I meet every single point on the slide, so I do apologise. So if we go back to the travel analogy, how would you get there? I'm so sorry, you're like, oh fuck, why did you ask me? How would you get there?
I could answer.
No, okay, how would you get there? How would you get to Paris?
How do you get?
How would you get to Paris?
We said you will start.
You're a star.
Yeah.
Okay, how would you get to Paris?
The roadmap.
Use a roadmap. Okay, excellent. I love that. That's so old school. I'm like, what? Okay, and how would you get to Paris?
With a plan.
Your plan? Okay,
Yes.
I mean, yeah, awesome. So I was hoping someone would say, oh, I'd fly or whatever. Right, okay. So in terms of understanding where you are, right, that would influence that decision, right? So I probably would say, yeah, you're a star because we're based in London. But like if we're based in Glasgow, right, your vision's the same.
No.
Your strategy has to be different because your starting point's different. Does that make sense? Yeah. So equally, you need to understand the gaps that go in between it. So let's say that I just said, right, everyone here, we all work together. Everyone needs to go to Paris tomorrow. But I don't say what your budget is or what time the meeting is that we're meeting each other. So it's a very common sense thing to say. This is what we're doing. This is the plan. This is what the end goal is going to look like. But when we get there, I might have blown a shit ton of money because you took an Uber all the way there. You hired a Lamborghini. Okay, you're like a Lamborghini kind of guy. Maybe you took a helicopter. Maybe someone else walked and they're going to get there 2 weeks late. So I have no idea how long it takes to go to Paris, but to walk to Paris. But hey ho. So again, what I'm saying is even a strategy that is common sense, and you can go, we don't really need one because we all kind of know what we're doing. We know what the end goal is. Everyone's on board. Everyone's got the vision. We've all got the same vision, right? But the method of getting there is the method of getting there and the steps in between is what's important. So the gap analysis is sitting down and hashing it out and really looking at what actually are those steps involved and how do we implement those things. So when we're talking about this bit here, don't try to be more cyber mature than you are business mature. If you think about, I'm going to say this analogy just because I think that it's just a very easy way of explaining it. If we're trying to be more business mature than we actually are, I could go, I want to avoid that. I want to make sure everyone gets there at the same time. I want to make sure everyone is with under £100 budget. And I want to make sure we all meet in the same room. Right. Okay. So a business that's not very mature might just take it for granted and they've got that slapdash. It actually happens, but it doesn't happen very well. It's a bit chaotic. They kind of get there in the end, but whatever. Right. A business that's a little bit more mature might go, okay, everyone, use your company cards. And once you get there, just expense everything. And we've got the PAs have all set up all of the transport. So you just need to turn up to the Eurostar and that's it. Just follow the instructions we've sent in the email. So a company that's immature, trying to be more mature, might be in a situation where they'll say, okay, so we need to hire someone to book all the travel. And then we need to go and get everyone company cards, and then we need to get them on the expenses system, but we don't have an expenses system and we don't have any company cards. So we need to understand how to do that. We also need to do a recruitment process. And before you know it, you've created all these mini projects under this bigger project, and you've created several layers of strategy and overcomplicated the whole thing. So if you go and you're honest with yourself and you say, I'll bring this to cyber in a minute, I promise. And you say, okay, we're not a very mature business. And maturity isn't necessarily age. So you can be a massive business that's chaotic behind the scenes and not very mature in its business processes or its cybersecurity or its ability to define and implement strategy. And then you can be a smaller company that's got a bit of skin in the game, a bit of longevity, and they know what they're doing. So to avoid either getting everyone and they accidentally turn up at the Colosseum and go, how did we end up here? We're supposed to go to Paris. Or avoiding spending loads of money, getting everyone there on time in the right way, but they're all just doing their own thing. What you need to do is kind of go, right, okay, let's be honest with ourselves. Okay, we're not the most mature business. So we don't have company cards for everyone, and we don't have an expenses system. We don't have this and we don't have that. So what do we have? Right, okay, we can just put some ground rules in place. So your strategy becomes a lot simpler because it's based on what you can actually implement as a business. And yeah, I think I'll shut up now.
Okay, vision, strategy, and execution. So how do you know what's what? How do you get your thoughts in order when you're knee deep in all the possibilities? So here we have a short list towards the bottom of this slide of security related things. So we're going to sort this mess out and we're going to decide if they are a vision, a strategy, or if they are execution or tool related.
Can we just jump in before that and explain what we mean by that? Because I probably was supposed to say that, but I didn't. So when I was talking about that analogy, I'm sorry, I keep going back to that one, but I don't know the what people do in this room, so I do apologize. So when it comes to the vision is this thing. I know, and we're all on board, we're ending up in Paris tomorrow, right? The tools are the methods by which we get there. So a bus is a tool, right? A train is a tool, right? Execution, you can use it in the same thing, but it's not the same sort of method, but it's not a tangible thing. And then the strategy is the bits and the route and the plan, as you said, to get there. So if you think of it in a cyber security scenario, how many times, Rosie, if you had calls with people and you've said, all right, tell me about your strategy for the year, and what do they say?
I want to implement MFA.
I want to buy this tool.
I want to buy this tool.
I'm going to buy this thing. We're going to get a pen test. So they also don't know where that fits into their strategy as well, because they don't have one. So your strategy should be this long and your tools should be the things that slot in across it. So sorry, Rich, go ahead.
So brace yourselves, folks, because I'm really going to labour this point to make sure it's hammered home. So we'll look at the first item in the list. I want to stop the hackers. No, I don't have a column for that will never happen, but you know, so that will sit in the vision. Typically things that you want to achieve, the end result, the end game, will be the vision. So we'll look at the next item on the list, which is implement MFA in Office 365. Is that a vision? No. Is it a strategy?
We ask people what they think.
We can do. Do we think it's a strategy? No, absolutely not. I mean, it is closer to a strategy, but as it's a thing that somebody does, a command that's run, a box that's ticked, it falls firmly in the execution and tool column. So let's put it another way. If your vision was to secure user accounts, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the strategy is to implement MFA in Office 365. But it wouldn't be, because you wouldn't just implement MFA on Office 365 and call that done. You wouldn't say that vision of securing user accounts is achieved. Your strategy would have lots of other things in it, such as deploying a single sign-on identity provider, or locking down authentication to certain IP addresses, or just allowing domain join PCs for those of you that like group policies in Windows. So that's why it wouldn't be a strategy on its own. So it goes firmly in the right-hand column.
So you just give everyone the next answer.
Oh, that's fine. It's fine. Look, I've got a list this long. We're not going to go through them all because it'd be really, really boring. Okay, so let's just carry on and just pretend I didn't completely fluff that. So this one is slightly more contentious. Building a SOC to or hiring a SOC to detect breaches. So not a vision. We know that. It's not a strategy either. So if you were to say, sorry, it's not a tool either, thank you. Getting all kinds of wrong. So if it was a vision, you would say, I want to increase, or I will increase security visibility across my estate. You wouldn't jump straight to hiring a SOC, okay?
What's a SOC?
A security operations center. So for those of you that don't know, a SOC are the group of people, the security analysts, who will look at a SIEM. A SIEM is a centralized point where all your security event logs come together across your cloud apps, your endpoints, so laptops and desktops, and potentially your network traffic. So the SOC are the people, the first line of defense in terms of checking those and escalating any or handling any kind of alerts that come out of those systems. So we'll just pop the rest into the correct columns. There we go. Now, interestingly, we look at the AWS stuff, you'll see that that might well be IT strategy rather than cybersecurity. Truth is, it doesn't much matter because it is the mindset that counts here, not the content of these boxes. Okay, this is important. Avoid this mistake. And you can quote me on this, absolutely. I've seen this happen many, many times. Your vision doesn't become a tangible reality without a strategy to get you there. In fact, without a strategy, on the left-hand side of that previous table with a vision, you've either got a wishy-washy dream state that you can't achieve, or on the other side of that previous table, you end up with a laundry list of tools. And you purchase those without a strategy, and it will leave you with a depleted budget, gaps in your security coverage, no guarantee of protection, obviously, and no reduction in risk. In fact, actually, you'll have a happy bunch of software vendors and an unhappy bunch of sysadmins. So absolutely, it's a strategy that pins it all together. Okay.
Bloody hell, where's Rosie's slides gone?
I'm at the end, it's fine.
Stood in the middle dancing. Like,
Yeah, sorry,
do something.
keep dancing just for one more
I'm
time.
at the end, don't you worry.
So just to really hammer the point home and maybe slightly labour the point, I apologise. We'll put this another way. Okay, so in this scenario, I'm in the mood for a burger. I pull out my phone, I bring up Google Maps, and it gives me a set of directions from, say, Temple Tube Station round to McDonald's on the Strand. So the route says that I can take the district and circle lines and then from Temple and then walk the rest of the way. Can you identify the vision, strategy and execution? So can anybody tell me what the vision was? Getting a burger because I'm hungry. Absolutely. And the strategy? That's right, using the tube to get there and walking the rest of the way. And
this whole thing is a strategy, really. Like,
yeah,
the decision's been made to use a tube or a bus. Like, we know the starting point, we know the end point, right? And we also know the way to get there. We've also got a backup system to read if we can't follow this. And we know that if we just follow those steps, we'll get there. Now, if we didn't follow those steps and we were just walking around London aimlessly going, do you know where McDonald's is? Do you know where McDonald's is? I want a burger, I'm really hungry. We'd find a McDonald's, but it might not be the right one. And yeah, probably find it when we're past the point of being hungry, and we might pass a kebab shop and go there instead.
yeah, absolutely. So we've covered the vision and strategy here, but the execution is what you physically do. It's the buying your tube ticket, it's getting on the tube train, it's getting off the other side, getting through the gates, and so on and so forth, and walking up to the Strand, paying with your card, and away you go. So that's where all three of those components actually come into everyday life, and you don't even realise it. So,
Shall we play a game?
Rosie, absolutely.
Taking away, we've got some prizes. Okay, so this is so silly. The prizes are, I'm sorry that the prizes are shit. It's purely because we forgot to pick them up on the way, so we had to run out to the shop. So we've got like, I mean,
Don't tell them the prizes yet, we want them to take part.
oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Is this a strategy, a vision, or a tool?
Well, this is a bank account with loads of money in it, and you think about it from a business perspective. So you're in a cyber team, you've been brought in to help implement the strategy. They say, this is the vision, we want all these millions and millions of pounds in our bank account. What is that? No. Vision, who said vision? I hope you like Yorkshire tea.
Have you got any bin bags in there or anything?
So it is a vision. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Implement MFA.
Is that a
Who said tool first?
this lady?
Okay.
Dunkin' biscuits.
You're all right.
Well, it's supposed to be right.
And a walking route. We have laboured this point.
Yeah, this point obvious. You get this one.
Strategy there.
Over there.
Who said it first?
Strategy.
She did.
Oh, was it you? Was it?
We're being told it's over here. We have got another prize though.
Got another prize then.
You can have
Who is it?
over here. Amazing headshots.
Right, some biscuits.
Very appropriate for Walker's strategy, Walker's biscuits.
Oh, yeah, that is. Got another one? No, hold on. Okay, so we'll save that for the best question at the end, I guess. I'll put them there just so that you really form up your questions. and Get inspired.
Right, so where are we? Establish a starting point for your strategy. So when you're looking to create a cyber security strategy, it's really important to know your starting point. And it's because it's much easier to work forwards from that and plan to expand your current cyber security than it is to work backwards and try to shoehorn your strategy in to fit your current cyber tech stack. Not to mention your processes, of course, and all of that good stuff. After all, every company has at least some form of cybersecurity controls in place anyway, by default, even if it's just let's have antivirus on all the machines, you know, and even if they sit just under the IT banner. So it follows that understanding your starting point will more often than not require an understanding of the tech that you have. That was a long way just to literally say what's in 5 words there. Never mind. So you should also have a good understanding of your external attack surface area. So this could be any open ports on a firewall, or it could be how your e-commerce site hangs together. You can't secure what you can't see. So get visibility of all of your public facing assets. You should also have a clear understanding of how your staff access or get access to your on-prem network or your cloud resources. So who handles your identity and access? Do you have VPN access? Are remote workers actually working in a secure manner? Well, speaking of which, obviously your end users and their laptops are a huge attack vector. They'll do the wildest things. So they'll share their credentials, they'll install malware. So getting a handle on what they've got and how they use it is key. So essentially, those top 3 points are hinting that you should perform some kind of gap analysis. Because again, if you don't measure it, how do you make decisions around it?
And if you, sorry to jump in, but if you go back to what we were saying before about the steps to go and have the burger, right? When you're talking from a cybersecurity perspective, you've got to make sure the basics are covered first. So you've got to identify what those steps need to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at this bottom point here. How do you define what your vision is supposed to be without that information? Where do other people get their visions from? This is kind of where we start to talk about the dark underbelly of the cybersecurity world. Unscrupulous salespeople absolutely love to sell you their vision, okay? And then they'll tell you that it's your own vision, of course. And it just so happens that their solutions will, of course, achieve your vision because really it's theirs. In fact, they'll tell you can skip the whole strategy piece, just buy and install their tool and it will fix all of the problems. And that's one of the ways they reel you in. A lot of the cyber industry is like that, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. It's very much where IT was in the early 2000s. For those of you who have grey hair and a beard like mine, you'll remember the countless suppliers who would tell you anything just to secure a sale. And a lot of that is still very prevalent in the industry. So, just quickly check my notes because I've lost my place because I went off on a tangent.
All right, just hand over.
Yeah, I think you're done.
Yeah.
Okay, so like Rich was touching on there, there is a lot of snake oil in the cyber industry. There's overzealous marketing departments that will convince you using fear, uncertainty, or doubt. You might have heard of FUD that is a silver bullet, but actually it's made of plastic. So if somebody's telling you they can remove all cyber risk in your business, or if you feel like you're being sold to, normally you are. There are lots and lots of products. I think the last count is about 3,000 new cyber products that are out in the industry. There's a lot of money. It's a $1 trillion industry in cyber. So there will be people that want to sell you military grade and all these kind of things. So if you're seeing those marketing words, you're seeing those statistics, ask questions. Now, I'm not saying there aren't good tools, good products, and obviously you need to be more secure, but you need to go into any sort of marketing event, and a conference is a marketing event, it's paid for by marketing, and ask questions. Make sure that what you're buying or what you're looking to achieve relays back to those business goals. What does my business need to do? So I've had before a business has come to me to say, I need a pen test. I need to pen test all my systems and my website, all these things, sort of 5 or 6 different systems. And when I went through with them, why they're pen testing their website, when it didn't hold any data, it was just sales data. It didn't hold, they didn't take any payments. They wanted to pen test it because they tested it last year. They were sold last year that they needed to do this. So there is unscrupulous things out there and businesses out there. Like Rich said, it's the cyber industry is where the IT industry was sort of 20 years ago. If you're being sold to the NHS is using our system, you're a factory, your threat profile is very different from the NHS, and make sure that when you go to conferences, you're not being sold on the latest buzzword, the latest technology, that might not be right for your business. You need to go back to your strategy, does it do what you need to? With your strategy, sometimes you don't actually need to buy new tools. When you buy Google, or if you've got Google or Microsoft Workspace, like Defender is perfectly good as a firewall and an antivirus. We've been into DFIR cases where the really expensive EDR tool was the first thing to get encrypted. But Defender that a business didn't know they had was what alerted to a ransomware. So you can find this. If you have a look at, like Rich was saying, understanding your threat profile, if your business has 3 critical systems that they need to operate, and we're thinking about operations, not cyber, if you're a factory that produces flooring, for example, you've got to think about the factory systems, they need to be protected. The sales thing, that needs to be protected so you can get invoices out. Have you got lots of different tools and technologies? If you do an audit of your business, have you got multiple tools that are doing the same thing? Rather than buying a new tool, can you look at configuring what you've got to get more out of your vendors? If you've got duplicate vendors, like we've been in businesses and we've got 3 or 4 seams, and you're like, what's happened here? You might be able to save some money and make efficiencies by removing yourself from contracts that you don't need, or looking at configurations to patch any gaps that you've got. You don't need multiple tools to solve problems. Not every problem needs a brand new tool. Sometimes you can look at what you've got and make better use of that.
I think it's interesting as well that you can go to like InfoSec or DEFCON or whatever conference, and you know, 5 or 6 years ago everything was DevSecOps. It didn't matter if it was a company that didn't even sell like development services, they'd have DevSecOps on everything, right? And then it was like EDR, XDR, MDR, whatever they are. And then you've got SIEM, and then you've got SaaS, and then you've got SOAR, right? Now it's AI. So you then have these conversations at events like this, and you're chatting away to someone, and they're talking about the SOAR that they're implementing, or the fact that they're doing DevSecOps, or the fact that they've just bought DevSecOps services, for example, and you're like, that's a way of working, it's not even a tool. So you do inadvertently get an industry that is influenced by this. It's just fine, it's not the worst thing in the world, but if you don't understand your starting point, and you don't understand the business vision, not your vision of a head of cyber, the vision of the business and how cyber supports that business, it doesn't go against the grain of it. If you don't understand that starting point and that business end goal, you're going to really struggle to not be influenced within those gaps and those hit points within that strategy. You'll be really influenced on how that develops if you're not clear cut on what you need.
Things that should be in your strategy.
Okay. I know I said earlier that strategy should not be a list of tasks, but sometimes it really is about getting the basics of cybersecurity in place within the organisation. When people talk about cybersecurity basics, these are the sorts of things they're talking about, and that's not a wistful bunch of things. It's literally this sort of stuff. So your vision statement might be, this year we'll establish a good baseline level of security across our organisation, and that will form the foundation of our security program going forward that we can build on over the next few years. Your strategy might be to implement a list like that you see on the left there, and please note that not one item on that list is a tool. So
does everyone know what like RBACs is and MFA?
Good.
That's not, no.
RBACs is role-based access control. So making sure that each department only has access to the systems that they need.
Would that be integrated with the Microsoft Active Directory.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. You could have RBACs on one tool, you could have RBACs on this room, really. It's like the concept of minimal amount of people that need it.
So once you've got some sort of goals like this, your next step is then to potentially identify the tools that will deliver that. Now, from there on out, obviously, you can go and get budgetary pricing for the tools that you've identified. The real short list of those tools though comes a little bit later, and it should be done in such a way that you balance obviously price, functionality, and the overlap with other tools. And this plays into what Rosie said around you might already have a lot of these jobs being covered by your tools, and they will overlap each other in terms of functionality and abilities. And so sorting out that jigsaw puzzle, making sure that they fit, might mean that you potentially drop some tools, some tools that you've already bought. You don't know until you see how they fit into your strategy.
Okay. So security standards, your business might be a startup that wants to supply to the NHS. So if we think of cybersecurity as a business enabler, to supply to the NHS, you might need to get ISO certifications. So by going through and looking at security standards like ISO, you can influence the board to say, we need to get ISO, we need to implement these security controls. But by doing that, we're going to get better quality customers, and we need this to be able to supply. So this is your supplier assurance. When you think about risk management and productivity, just check my notes on this one because I can't remember. You need to think about where risk is owned in the business. So for example, your cybersecurity touches every single department. So you need to think not just about your technology, but also the people and processes. So if I implement a control that says, right, as of today, MFA on everything, and I'm a supermarket and the tills have got MFA, you've suddenly got some really annoyed people and your technology is not working, everything's falling over. So you can't just think about, from a cybersecurity perspective, I need to do this because of I've decided this is our risks. You need to get your people and your processes on board and make sure that what you're doing is relevant for those people, processes, and departments. So different departments will have different security needs. Sure that you've got technical controls that make sense for those needs is really important, but also being aware that some people might be within a business. I know I've worked at companies, I've been there for 20 years. I started as a receptionist and then I've ended up in sort of services, and I've ended up in different departments. As I move departments, I shouldn't have access to everything. So as a PA, they might have access to full systems. When you move into development, you might have access to different systems. And the joiners, movers, and leavers policy needs to match so that you're not automatically giving everybody access to everything. And from an audit perspective, that's why it's really important to go in and do that auditing. What tools is every department using, and should they have access to that? But also from a budget perspective, there's no point me saying, I want to implement a SOC 2 weeks after budget cycles just ended. So you need to understand where your budgets also fit within the business. And when you get that budget approval, like when do people start looking at budgets? Because if you go in too late, you've got to wait another 12 months, depending on how your business operates.
It's interesting actually that if you think about it, building a strategy within a business, it's combining the art of the boring with the art of the interesting. So your vision's interesting, getting everyone on board is an interesting challenge, but then you've got to really think about budget cycles and PowerPoint presentations and boards and who you've got to try and get on board. Yeah.
Okay. So you've got your strategy. What's next? Over to you again, Rich.
Thank you. So you've got your strategy, it's been built upon a good vision statement, it's a good fit for your organisation, and it covers across all your departments, and you roughly know what resources it's going to take to deliver it and how much they'll cost. So what's next? Well, you need to double check that it's aligned to your organisation's business risk register, because that's what's going to underpin the whole thing ultimately. And no, this isn't or shouldn't be the same as your IT risk register. Also check that you've sufficiently highlighted any benefits to the business that will be brought about by implementing your strategy. I've often found that in various roles over the years that implementing a strong cybersecurity strategy actually helps well, it actually makes a huge difference in terms of winning new business, certainly in a B2B sort of context. So don't forget, your strategy and the way you present it needs to speak a whole new language. You're not talking necessarily technical. You're not talking cybersecurity. What you need to do is you need to speak in the language of the board. So your board will be very much used to conversing in terms of risk and finance. So that's how you need to frame. That's how you need to frame your strategy when you're going to present it to the board. They won't be necessarily as well versed in the latest cloud technology or the most prolific advanced persistent threat groups. So, you know, that's hacking groups for those that aren't aware. If you're making a business case, then you need to speak the lingo of the business. So assuming there's an appetite and capital available, there should be a high degree of certainty that your strategy will be signed off and funded. So from here on out, you're delivering. So that will involve project managers potentially dealing with internal governance, change approval boards potentially, you know, the nuts and bolts of delivering anything new essentially within the business. So the last point is actually key. If you've got an approval from the board, then you need to complete that loop by reporting back to the leaders that backed you in the first place. Don't solely focus on how well the project is going. That's for PMs and people like that to deal with. Gather your metrics around how well your initiatives are performing and relay those back to the board. Oh, and update the risk register in the process. You've already set a lot of precedents around setting, funding and delivering a vision and strategy. So completing the loop in terms of feedback will demonstrate to the senior leadership teams that their money has been well invested and not just spent willy-nilly. So that would hopefully make future initiatives much easier to get off the ground.
Okay, so common mistakes that we typically see. Hopefully by now we know how to do a strategy. We know how to explain that we're solving a business risk problem. Your strategy should include how you're going to get the vision, but shouldn't be a benefit realization of a tool. So if your strategy says, I'm going to buy this tool, you need to start again. Neglecting your people and processes is another big problem that we see. So cyber, like I said, affects every single department, from your tech teams, to your marketing, to your receptionist. You can get a lot more success and not be known as the department that puts blockers in place if you get everybody on board, and you'll have more success and a greater impact. You cover all three areas: people, process, and technology. Now, slightly controversial, you don't have to implement everything you've seen in a CISP training manual. Your cyber strategy should reflect your threat profile and your risk appetite for your business and your sector. The threat profile for a hospital would be very different from a factory. Doing the basics, checking default passwords, implementing MFA. Many attacks can be stopped by MFA. So that's a really basic thing that you can implement. Updating firmware, updating those patches will always stand you in good stead. You haven't got to have £1 million budget. Not every cyber department is, 50 people strong. Many businesses that we speak to are one poor soul responsible for IT, and they've been lumbered with cyber. I don't think that everyone's got a massive department. You can do this on your own in a business. Now, I do work in strategic solutions. That includes being involved in conferences, but I know we've touched on snake oil and sales. What I do want you to think about is, if you're going to a conference and being scared by the latest threat, everybody's doing this, why are you not using AI? Someone is selling to you.
Yeah, if you didn't go in there as an intelligent person already doing the job, knowing that you've got a problem in a particular area, if you didn't go in there knowing that problem existed and then coming out knowing, now you know that fucking 5 problems exist and I've got to fix them all, you've just been sold to. There's 4 things there that's just been added onto your list mentally that weren't there before. If you're an intelligent person and you're pretty grounded in your knowledge as maybe an IT manager, or you've worked in IT for a few years, trust yourself, back yourself on that. That would be my advice.
Over to you.
Oh, is it me? Okay.
Overconfidence.
Okay, yeah. So I'd say that a common mistake as well that leaders make is overconfidence in why they want to do things and that they're right, and you get a lot of conflict. So we speak to people quite often that, they'll say, I want a pen test. And you go, great, that's awesome, we obviously want you to buy one. Why do you want one? Out of curiosity. And they'll say, I think it's cool, or we've not had one this year, or I don't know. Or someone told me to, or I don't know. I thought I'd just tick that off the list because it'll look good and I want a promotion. Okay, well, none of those things say anything about the business, right? So then they'll come back to you a month later and go, I can't get the budget for it. And I don't know why. Have you got any like insights into how you think I might be able to get the budget? And you'll say, well, what's the strategy with the business? Where's the business heading? And they'll go, no, they're just plodding along. We're making yogurts. You're like, right, okay. So you make yogurts and you sell those yogurts to supermarkets. You don't sell them to just randoms on the street. No, we sell our yogurts to Tesco and Asda. Right. So no one can go to your website and order a yogurt. No. So you have no input fields on your website. No, not so that person's wasting the time and they look really, really stupid to people that are higher up from them, because those people that are higher up from them on the board will go, this guy just doesn't get it. We want him to just shut up and do the IT and do the security. That's horrible. It's a horrible thing to say. But if you're in that situation and you're trying to get something signed off, but you don't know why, or your reason for why isn't, this is what I need to do within my role to uphold the business objectives, then that's the wrong vision that you've got, right? So what we might say to them is, what downtime can you take in the factory? So how long is that factory able to be flatlined before you start losing money? And they might not have the answer to that, and they might go back and find out and say, okay, well, if that factory, our main yogurt factory, flatlined, we'd lose about £1 million a week. And you go, right, okay, there's your business case for DFIR. Well, there's your business case for a SEAM. So completely different. It's cybersecurity and it's still needed, but it's completely different and it's aligned with the business, and you can sell that internally to the boards. But then again, they might say, oh, well, the ransom that they're asking for is £1 million. So we'll just pay it. We'll go and pay for the service rather, not the ransom word even. And the next thing that's a really common thing that we see cyber leaders make is financial anchoring. So that's kind of, I don't know about anyone else in the room, but have you seen these CISOs that, like they're really like big on LinkedIn and everyone knows who they are, and they'll work somewhere for like a year or two and then they'll move somewhere else and they'll be like, hey, big announcement, guys, like hashtag living my best life at wherever. Well, the reason they tend to move on quite quickly is quite commonly known, that they might have great ideas, but they don't know how to develop a strategy and implement it. So what their way of doing that is to try and spend as much money as they can while they're there, to then go on to the next role and in the interview say, I was in charge of a £200 million project, right? So financial anchoring is kind of getting money to spend to show that you are like, Mr. Mrs. Big balls and boobs. So that's something we do see very often, and that sometimes people can be really skilled in psychology and they can get budgets out of people, but they tend not to do very well in their career because they're just blowing through money. So yeah, they're selling the strategy to obtain funding rather than obtaining funding to go within the strategy. And then the next one, sorry, is status quo bias. So we've always done it this way, so we'll just keep doing it. So that's kind of like your pen test people that's been told that they need to get a pen test when maybe they don't, maybe they do, right? Maybe that's awesome, but maybe they don't need 4 a year. Maybe they need 1, or maybe they need pen tests on different things to what they've currently got them on. Okay, so just going into somewhere, and we've always done it this way. Also, you do find, if we go back to the financial anchoring one, you do find people that will go into companies and they'll throw their weight around, and the way that they throw their weight around is with money. So if they are good at obtaining funds and doing a strategy, that's something else as well. I'll dip my boots in, I'll anchor myself. No one can get rid of me out of this role. It does actually work. Okay. Yeah, so trying to outsource accountability for every aspect of security. So that's not a strategy either. So sometimes you'll get companies that will go, okay, we need this problem fixed, go away and fix it. And your IT manager goes, I don't know what to do about cybersecurity, so I'll just outsource it all. And then they don't really concentrate on the relationship between the business and the outsource provider and where the gaps are and where the holes are. So things get missed and then you end up with more problems. A really good example of that is a company bought us in to assess their external SOC. So they had this external SOC where all their data went to them on a seam, and this group of people just had to sit and monitor it and, you know, alert them to anything that came up. Really funny story. We assessed their SOC and we were like, we think your SOC's fine, like there's nothing wrong with them. They're doing a decent job. They're sending you all of the alerts, assessing them first, but actually your internal team are not reading them. That's your problem. It's not your external SOC, it's your internal ones. So they were getting all these alerts and going, oh God, there's so many, I can't be bothered to read them. Rather than going, right, let's refine it, let's work with them, let's like build a relationship with this company, try and make more out of these alerts. They just went, fuck that, it's too much, I'm not reading it. So they spent money on us to come in and assess a company they'd spent a crap ton of money on, to then tell them that their internal people were a bit crap. Herd instinct and forced consensus. So this is the fashion, this is the trend, everyone else is doing it. Rosie's already talked about that. And then selective recall. So you did something and it worked well at a previous company, and that strategy went really well and the output was great. You go into another company and you go, I'll do the same thing. And again, that goes back to what Rosie was saying. If you a company doing one thing, it's not necessarily going to work another way. So I'll tell you a really good example as well is this company that we work with. They specialize in doing some sort of tech service. I can't go into too much detail, but they do some tech service for restaurants in the UK. Like, there's some software for restaurants in the UK. And we were like, okay, great, this is not hard. Like, no one cares about them. No one's going to hack them. And then, so the SOC were looking at things going, okay, this is a bit boring. And then all of a sudden it went like this, out of nowhere. Like China. I was like Trump, China. And all of these like attacks coming from China. And we were just like, Jesus, like this is crazy. We need to ring them and find out what this is. And they were all blocked. It was fine, but it was very unusual. And it went up in a day and then it just stayed at this level. And they were like, oh yeah, we didn't tell you about that. We've actually launched our software into all of these hospitals all over. And we were like, all right, okay, well, thanks for telling us. So it just shows how your cybersecurity strategy needs to change as the business changes. And that's why it's so important to be really like on top of what are we doing in the business. So it don't wait for someone to come and tell you, even if you're a junior SOC analyst, right? Have that knowledge in your head. That's how you're going to progress. Yeah, lack of alignment to business timelines and stuff. Next slide.
Over to Rich.
Yes.
This is the last slide.
Is it?
Yeah, and it's a bit of a long one. They look quite innocent. 4 little bullet points, but actually, so yeah. So just a quick note before we wrap up around some of the issues you might encounter that come from the environment you're operating in. You might find that in a very siloed environment, your plans are foiled by other teams and departments that will not accept change. You might even come across individuals that carry some influence within your organisation at a senior level who actively want to sabotage your plans because of a fear that operating in a more secure way will disrupt their workflows or make things slower. In these cases, you have 2 options, essentially, either brute force or diplomacy. It's horrible to say it, but it's true. Only you know your organisation and what the best approach is. Senior support should be informed and utilised with either of those approaches. So, second point, bureaucracy. Bureaucracy.
That is a hard word, to be fair.
Yeah, I need to change my teeth. So anyway, that could hold things up. So it's often tied up with the above point, actually. Some businesses seem to thrive on red tape, and navigating this can be an art form in itself. You'll already know if you're one of these organisations. If you are, then please accept my condolences. So here is my personal favourite, the cashless budget. So some senior leaders have this uncanny ability to simultaneously underestimate the financial position of the business and yet have no ability to say no to spending. You may well find that you get senior sign-off of your strategy, but when it comes to speaking to vendors, you suddenly find that there's no credit available, or well, there's just no cash in accounts when you go and speak to them to get a PO sorted out. So that stops you in your tracks when it comes to delivering on your promises. So if that happens, what you can do is you can go back to cybersecurity basics. So using what you've already got, optimize, repurpose, rejig, reposition based upon the tools that you already have to achieve what you need to do. I mean, you might well find that if you don't have existing tooling to meet your strategic requirements, then you can also look at the open source community. So obviously everybody knows that that most things seem to run on Linux these days. Everything from CCTV systems through to massive web server farms. So there is a huge and very mature open source community out there, a whole bunch of software that does everything you could ever imagine. So what you might find is a useful, suitable alternative to the stuff that you previously thought you had budget for but couldn't actually afford.
Yeah, your strategy may need to pivot, but you can still get there, can't you?
You can absolutely get there. You know, you just got to be a bit creative sometimes. So the last pitfall, organizational change. Sometimes the situation can appear very bleak with so much work to be done. You've ended up with such a huge strategy that it's going to change a very large chunk of the business in many different ways. So your business might appear to be so large that it's going to be like turning an oil tanker. If that's the case, then my advice would be to basically consider what's achievable now, what's achievable medium term, and what's achievable long term. You might find that actually you need to break down your strategy over a couple of financial years or longer. You might want to kick off the long-term stuff now and leave it simmering and gently bubbling up to be ready for the big change in a couple of years' time. The timing of these things you can map out well in advance. So absolutely do so. If you think your organization is going to be difficult to change course on, then yeah, start early and get things simmering. Start with incremental change if you have to, and then you will be fine when the time comes to actually sort of make a cut over. Okay. Also, one last thing, C-level execs, people like that, they would have been, a lot of them will have been in the business for quite some time. So they would have seen and managed quite significant change as well. So don't be afraid to ask senior teams for more support. That doesn't necessarily mean more resource. It might just be picking their brains because, yeah, these are the sorts of people that will have made huge organizational change, are very likely to have had a long career as it sits. And if they've not done it in the current business, they would have done it somewhere along the line. So absolutely use everybody you can as a resource.
Can I just say one last thing as well?
Yeah.
I think someone started clapping about it. Get off the stage, guys. Yeah, we're going to finish at any second. Do you want to go back? Sorry. Yeah, that's 3 minutes. No, it's fine. Yes. Okay. So one last point that I don't think I mentioned, it was on a slide, but I didn't read it out, was that when it comes to a board or C-level execs, all risks are financial risks. So it doesn't matter what you go to them with, whether you're like, this is a massive risk to our security, or this is a massive risk to our brand. They don't give a shit. They give a shit about the finances that's tied to that. So all risks are financial risks. All things that you want is money, all of it. So if you can speak in the language of finance, then you not go far wrong when it comes to implementing your strategy. And also when it comes to cybersecurity, everyone thinks they need everything. There is justification for everything in cyber. It's quite unique in that sense. So you can say this is literally best practice, guys, and we're not doing it. But if best practice is going in that direction and the business is going in that direction, look at where the overlaps are and where you can marry the two. Otherwise, you are going to be incredibly frustrated. So that's two key things. But that's it, guys. So thank you. Sorry, go on.
Not to pull that part, so I'll ask Rosie, because my greatest ever thing was last seat at an event, top table, IT, then secretary, Yorkshireman. Engineer does for 6 months what any fool can do for a month. So I suspect you're of that ilk. Is there a role for reasonable security, the thing, which is the implementation approved by the US Attorney General of good hygiene? So it's called reasonable security. I encourage you to look. It's basically a summary of CIS recommendations. And how do you take that and sell that to your board?
Great question. So when it comes to reasonable security or implementing CIS controls, anything like that, again, best practice. So a lot of that is best practice. So you don't need to be, you know, like go back to the yogurt shop analogy. You don't need to be the most cyber secure, the most cyber savvy. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to drive your business forward. It's actually probably going to cripple your business because you don't need it, and you're going to be spending too much money on things that you don't need. Also, the impact of getting a phishing email if you're a yogurt shop is what? Not much, right? It's actually not as imperative as critical national infrastructure, right? So yeah, I mean, you genuinely need to do cyber security, but again, you can do the basics and you can do reasonable security, as you were saying. And when it comes to the CIS benchmarks, if anyone doesn't know about that, so if there's any students in the room, have a look at CIS benchmarks and the CSAT tool, the free, and you can go and read about it. And that's all really in-depth stuff on all these different basics. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, and they tend to be quick wins because again, you can use what you've already got. For a lot of them, it will say roll out MFA. You just go and turn it on a tool that you've already got. So yeah. Any more questions? Yeah.
So first, congrats for all for the presentations. Make it clear. Despite to work with a cybersecurity, it's a very important tool. It encourages us to keep our narrative more simple than we usually use. My question, I have two questions, but it's so quick. It's the first one, it's about the overlapping. It's every day we invest thousands of dollars on our account in the solutions, in the markets are changing and the solutions are doing more than the original scope. How to control the overlapping of the solutions to don't reinvest or invest in something that you also have inside your house. And another one, it's about the KPI. You explained and it's very clear that the money is the language that the business understands well, but what other metrics or measures that can I use to explain the progress or the evolution of my cyber strategy?
Okay, cool. So the first one was about overlap.
Yes, tools overlapping. How
do you, okay, right. So I suppose that you're always at risk of that without a strategy, right? And let's say that you go into a business and you're quite new there and they go, we've got this EDR product and we've got that's covering all of our endpoints. And then we want to get a SIEM and we're going to cover our network infrastructure with that and our SaaS products. You go, right, okay, common problem, common situation. So can we go back to our third parties, if you've got third parties, can we go back to our third parties and discuss add-ons, right? So maybe this endpoint company goes, oh, actually, we could have done that for you and it'll cost you this. And you go, actually, well, that's more expensive than going to this other company that's going to do our networks and SaaS. And they'll throw an endpoint for free. Well, actually, the program of work that would take you away from the current provider that you've got and implement all new processes with their service delivery managers, and you know, reinvent all of the meetings that you've got to attend to and define what you want in the reports and start from scratch. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. What I'm saying is you might go, this one's cheaper, right? But actually we've gone back and we've said, this is a problem for us. We don't want to overlap tools. We don't want to buy effectively two monitoring solutions. Can you help us with this? And 9 times out of 10, they'll go, yeah. Or the other one can, and you just move, right? So just talk to your providers and don't be scared to just go in there like a bulldog and say, this is what we want. Your other question was
it's about the KPIs.
So when you are going to the board and you're talking about the language of finance, right? The other one is you can get insight onto what the business strategy is away from cyber. You don't care about cyber at the minute. How well are you aligned to that? That would be a KPI I would be interested in. So, you know, if I said to my head of marketing, my vision is that this brand has this amount of followers and the website gets this amount of views, and I want that to happen in 6 months, right? And then she comes to me in 3 months and goes, I've created this whole marketing strategy and it's amazing, and you know, I've done it within budget, blah 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 blah. For this thing, I go, that's great, and the finances sound nice, but it's getting me no closer to the vision. So kindly go away and deal with that. So a metric for me would be that it's on budget and that the finances are there, and another metric would be that it is aligned to my business strategy. All businesses have them, and you'll have a business strategy, and we were talking about those checkpoints, right? So it would be getting to the train station, getting off the train station, going through passport control, right? So if your cybersecurity strategy doesn't go securing getting to the train station, securing the journey, securing it in transit, securing you while you're sat in your seat. So securing the data in transit, securing the data while it's sat. Okay. Do you get what I'm saying? Right? If you're not able to say, this is what I'm doing with my department strategy, it is going to be fruitless unless you've got weak leadership. Maybe you do your workshop. Any more questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, so who is accountable for the cybersecurity strategy in a typical privately run large for-profit organization?
I mean, that's a really good question. It tends to be on superficially, it tends to be the CISO or the CIO, or it can sometimes be the head of IT, and they'll report into the CEO, I guess, who's ultimately responsible if something does go wrong and it ends up in the press or something.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at a lot of the security standards, they will always say that the CEO is ultimately accountable, responsible for delivering that. We'll sit further down the hierarchy, absolutely.
Yeah, so if say if like our business something occurred, I could kick Rich in front of the police and in front of the press, but ultimately it's me.
You see, this is where the problem is. Until the business for which cybersecurity strategy is being developed, until they take the accountability, it's not going to happen.
But they do have to report of a breach. They have to report to the ICO. They have to do those sorts of things. So they are accountable to the ICO for breaches.
Yeah, and speaking of breaches and KPIs, metrics, and that sort of thing, it's very hard to measure how many breaches you haven't had.
Yeah.
It's very hard to prove a negative.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you said that, because if you think of if we go back to the marketing example, right? If a brand falls off a cliff, right, or if your social media profiles just disappear because they've not been monitored, not been used properly, I would hold my head of marketing accountable, right? So if 100%, so if I had if there was no sales and sales pipeline dried up, I would hold that person, the salesperson, accountable. And then likewise I would with a CISO or a director of technology that I put in charge of that. So I think it depends on the business, and yeah, it's a good question then.
And just a follow-up question, please, a quick one. I think is a reasonable good timeline of a strategy implementation. Obviously, it depends on many factors, budgets and size of organization. But typically, a large organization which is doing
depends on the vision, depends on the end vision, right? So if you're going into a business and you're like flatlining it and saying, right, we're starting from scratch and there is very basic cybersecurity, but actually we've got this new government client and they are going to leave us in 6 months if we've not got this thing implemented. You have just time blocked yourself. You've got to get it done in 6 months. Right? So part of your strategy is to go, right, how do we find speed efficiencies? Can we use AI? Can we hire more people? Can we cut some dead weight from the company? So you can close it in or you can expand it based on what the time frame is dictated to you, what the vision is. So the vision is we've got to keep that customer happy, right? And another an example of a vision might be that you've got an NHS trust that says, right, okay, we've had to throw away loads and loads of blood because our blood fridges are crap, right? And our blood fridges are crap because the network's old and they're constantly trying to reconnect and it's doing the battery. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up now. But let's just say that you find this one problem and it becomes a bigger problem, it becomes a bigger problem, it becomes a bigger problem. That's actually a blessing because you can go, right, this is the vision is we need to maintain this blood better, but your strategy is basically written itself because you've gone, we need to go outwards in and we need to say, right, everything network all the way down to the fridges. That's what we need to be working on from a technical perspective, from a budget perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective. And we need to do that by this timeline because we've got whatever, Right, so you go, right, the only way we can do it in that timeline is we hire this third party, we hire this third party, and that dictates a bit of your budget. So it really does depend on the vision. So I can't really say, but if we use the Paris analogy, a week, right?
Yeah.
So I can go, right, everyone book your tickets on this day, email me when you book your tickets. Check you've got your passport sorted. I've got my passport sorted. Right, okay. Get everyone up on 0 so they can do their expenses. I don't want to faff around with that. Okay, we'll leave a bit of leeway time, give everyone a day of fun. Get it done in a week. It really depends on the vision. Great question.
Rich, you've mentioned the importance of feedback to the stakeholders.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
later on in the Q&A, you also mentioned the difficulty of showing that something didn't happen.
Yeah.
So what are your sort of best practice suggestions for showing a successful implementation of the strategy when the results of that strategy should be that nothing bad happens?
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can only count what has happened. So that could be the number of alerts from the scene, or the number of high, medium, and low severity alerts. You want to see the higher severity alerts dropping down a bit. Could be the number of, I don't know, alerts from antivirus saying that you've got bad files across your estate. You know, so you can measure that sort of thing. You can also measure the human element. So in typical things, you know, everyone's used to the IT support metrics. So average time to close a ticket, average time to respond, you know, things like that. So you can apply all those sorts of things with just a bit of creativity back into cybersecurity metrics. So, you know, we operate a SOC service for a whole bunch of very interesting customers. And we report regularly on the total number of events going into a SIEM. We talk about the number of alerts generated and how that filters down to actual case escalations, serious things that have to be handled and dealt with. So from a SOC point of view, there's a whole bunch of interesting metrics around that. But really, it will vary from organization to organization. It will depend on what you can get out of your tools. And it will also depend on what the board wants to see. Some boards are slightly more technical than others. Some only speak the language of finance, in which case you can say something along the lines of, we invested X number of pounds in this solution. It has enabled an uplift in sales by being, I don't know, certified ISO 27001 or something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we're seeing with a lot of customers, supplier onboarding questionnaires, supplier assurance, particularly if you supply to banks or to critical national infrastructure as customers. So
what
being able to onboard customers faster, and we've got more customers now because we've got our ISO, that time to close
You have
deals
to know where the
quicker.
links are, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always just metrics. Being able to convey a narrative will be more powerful.
And I guess the last thing I'll say on that is like cost efficiency savings as well. So if you go into a company that's already got these things set up, so you don't have to go and implement all these things, if you assess how they're working and operating, and as brutal as it sounds, you cut some things. So it might be you reduce data storage because you go, well, we've not got anything by law telling us we have to have 12 months of data storage, but we have got the legal requirement to have 30 days because of the industry that we're in or whatever. So you go, okay, I've just now saved 11 months of storage costs, right? And it's not actually made us any better off, any worse off as a business. We're not lost any customers, we're not at risk legally. So you've then made a huge cost efficiency saving. That's going to make you look really good to the board. And that is important. It's important that you look good to them, because you're then going to be in a position to fight for your team and fight for what they need and fight for things that you really do need later on. So if you can just look at things and say, where's the efficiency savings and how do I tie those efficiency savings to revenue and just money in general, not necessarily revenue, but yeah.
Also, the highlight here is that this kind of narrative should be part of your strategy.
Yeah.
Without that, it's difficult to prove that it's working.
Well, you'd have to like present your strategy anyway, wouldn't you? Like in any size company, if you were tasked with building a strategy, you'd have to present it. And in order to present it, you'd have to understand it inside out, and you'd have to understand how it ties to the business strategy and how you're going to pay for it.
Well, this is the thing. If you imagine that your strategy has a bunch of bullet points of things you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve them, you can actually then look back at the end of your initiative and say, right, did I achieve this? Did this happen? Does this work well? Did all of this go in? And you can actually then, by answering those questions, you can then go back and pull metrics from various platforms, speak to people, get some narrative, and then make that form the basis of your report back to the board, back to the sponsors.
What we were saying earlier as well about people going into, sorry, senior leaders going into companies and going, oh, I'm going to do all these things, I'm going to turn this thing around and blah, blah, blah. And they're there a short period of time and then go somewhere else and do the same thing. They've not built up any muscles in implementation. If you can do that, you'll get a lot of respect and people will really be fighting over you. Not that you might not care, you might be like, I'm already like president of the world, whatever. But I don't know what you do. So if you're in a position where you can build a strategy and implement it and evidence that it's worked in a way that the board can understand and appreciate, awesome. If you go in after someone that's left after they've spent a load of money and you reduce that cost, awesome, you're gonna love you. So there's loads of things you can do to improve your own personal brand within a business that will enable you to drive strategy going forward, and those things are tied, even though we don't like to admit it. How long have we got? Do you want me to shut up now?
Yeah.
Thanks for your questions. They were
Okay.
right.
I think you've won. I think that was a good question.
Can we distribute it because I haven't got it back, sorry.
Oh, yeah, go back.
For tea, for tea.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Tea's the best.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Want your tea up here?
Tea.
It is the best.
We'll get you a cup of tea through there.
I'll get you
Don't
a cup of
worry.
tea.
Yeah, don't you worry. Don't you worry. So I've been monitoring the chat online, and while there hasn't been any particular questions for these guys, they've been having a great old chat online about all sorts of things, generally speaking, agreeing with all of the points that you guys are making.
I mean, generally.
We'll talk about that later. They had a huge debate about whether seam is pronounced seam or sim.
It's the
It depends. And they've also had a huge
Don't
debate
even know how
about
to
whether
say
you
it or
pronounce GIF or GIF. So you can tell the quality of the conversation that's been going
I
on.
mean, it is GIF, but that doesn't mean I like it any more than it is.
So I'd just like to reflect on something that I stuck into LinkedIn just while I was on the train coming down here from Stoke-on-Trent this afternoon. So I said tonight's topic is perfectly timed, as managing cyber risk across complex systems and third-party supply chains is hard. Getting board approval for a well-designed security strategy relies on it being described using appropriate language, which effectively and honestly expresses the cyber and resilience risks faced by the organization. And these guys have been making that point all the way through the talk tonight. It's about understanding your business and your organization and what the board see as important. Because if they don't see it as important, if it doesn't fit with the business goals, then you're never going to sell a cyber strategy to them. If they don't see the need for it, they won't buy it. So everything that these guys have been talking about tonight is about understanding the context of the organization, where that risk lies, making sure that it aligns with what the business thinks, and then articulating it in a way that the business can understand, in a way that the business wants to hear. So I think that's been absolutely fantastic this evening. I thank everyone who's online. We're going to go offline in 2 seconds. I thank everyone in the room for coming and for all of you great questions. And most of all, I thank these 3 great people for coming along and doing this for us.
Thanks for having us.